the screens, they do get rid of some of that emotional content that you can't read as easily across a screen as you can when you're in a room with somebody. But we try and have those morning interactions. And again, they're not for the business. They're not there just to meet and say, okay, like scrum meetings with technicians, what are you going to achieve today? That's not motivational, that's functional. Mm-hmm. What we want are those to reenact those water cooler moments, that when you go to the office, you have an interaction and you feel that you are part of a social community.
Hello, welcome back to What a Future. This week we're joined by Neil Cobold. Neil is the MD of Payprop UK, and since he's taken over, he's taken the company from a processing volume of £50,000 a month to a whopping 150 million per month. Neil's always been in the property sector. He's worked in a wide range of roles, including in the private residential market and in social housing. Neil, we're so grateful to have you with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Not a problem, and thank you for that wonderful introduction, Fraser. I hope I live up to it in the answers that we discuss. It's always a pleasure.
No, it's absolutely brilliant to have you here. And so let's dive in with the question. I think everyone knows it by now. What is the biggest issue affecting the world of work right now?
Uncertainty. And uncertainty breeds a whole heap of problems depending on who you speak to. So we've got uncertainty, and I'm going to do this from our perspective of the property industry because that's the reality that I sit within. But for us, that uncertainty is bringing our industry to a close because people don't know whether to buy new assets as new landlords and come in. Where will the regulation, where will the legislation sit? We've got people who work in the industry who don't know how to manage those properties because they feel like it's death by 1,000 cuts. You know, we've had property reports that have said, regulate the sector, put an overarching regulation over it, and it will professionalize it. But we still get this piecemeal legislation. And then if you come down to the companies operating, I mean, where do you operate when you've got that level of uncertainty in a sector? You know, the tech companies are often the ones that are seen to drive. How do you drive when you don't know the direction to drive? So it causes a level of instability. And unfortunately, that then passes down into your employees because they hear the same within the sector. It's the same messages that they're seeing. We're very good within the property sector of giving a woe is me. Not always as good at shouting at what the solution may be. There's some key players, professional industry bodies such as Property Mark, on the landlords such as their NRLA. They are really good at being the voice. But individually, we're not good at a voice. And unfortunately, at the moment, the employees are getting squeezed from both sides because they've got that uncertainty coming from the workplace and from the sector for us. And then they've got this uncertainty that everybody's got on the top of their lips at the moment, the cost of living crisis. I don't think there's a story I go into the news that's not telling me how much prices have gone up and where inflations are going to be and how much more difficult it is and how many more food banks there are. And whether that's your reality or not, enough of those stories entering into your world start to make you question, what's my security like? And if the industry is telling you it's uncertain and the economy is telling you that jobs are uncertain, unfortunately, you end up with a very nervous workforce. And a nervous workforce is not going to be as motivated to make those changes, to make those strides, to be as bold as within a growth market you need them to be. And so I think that's the biggest thing at the moment. We are almost at a point of being frozen to inaction by this level of uncertainty.
I think that's really interesting, and you know, there's a massive psychological effect, isn't there, to being uncertain in that way. Like it can take over your mind, not just when you're at your desk or wherever you work, but in your life in general. This effect is wide reaching. There's no surprise to see that it affects work.
Yeah, I mean, look, as human beings, people I engage with, we love being able to shout at a TV screen and can't understand why they can't get the question when we're sat in there relaxed of our front room and can get it like that, because that level of pressure, that level of uncertainty calls you to even question whether you know your own name. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, if we've got employees in that same situation and companies and industries coping with that same pressure, that is going to have a level of inertia that's going to just pull us back. And when everybody's saying we need to drive towards growth, they are not growth factors
Mhm.
that are going to work in a positive manner.
No, that's really interesting. I think this is something we can see in the wider market. You've given us a really interesting and quite precise picture of the property market. You can see this everywhere, can't you? This is not just a property market focused thing.
Yeah, I think the employee side is everywhere. I think what is unique to the property sector is this: we are such an economic driver.
Mhm,
We are such a vote winner
mhm,
regarding tenants and tenants' rights. And yet we're not a regulated entity. So for such an economic driver, such a polling thing regarding housing crisis, first time buyers, people being able to buy, tenants being overcharged, people being killed through poor property conditions, the fire that happened in the cladding, I mean, all of that, it polarizes our whole industry. And that is where I think for the property sector, that is something that is unique that not every other, like the retail sector.
mhm.
Retail sector's got its own problems. They've all got it. But that idea that we are so polarized in the market, if somebody finds out that, I don't know, John Lewis is changing the way that it is going to be structured and maybe have outside shareholders, some people will have a view, but quite a lot of people will be, and that doesn't affect me.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, when you start talking property, and the housing crisis, it affects everybody. Whether your mortgage, whether it's part of your pension, whether it's the way you're a landlord to somebody, whether you're a renter, whether you're living with parents and you're looking to when you want to get your own place, almost everybody has a view on the property sector. So because of that, it's a very polarizing market that for you to navigate in, you've got to be certain. You've got to go out there with a solution and you've got to be certain that solution is right.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm picking up on something you said in your sort of first bit of the answer there. That if we've got these pressures on both sides, from the market, from the economy, then this psychological issue that it gives us of feeling nervous, not feeling secure in what we're doing, this almost becomes a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, doesn't it? If we're holding ourselves back, we're not finding the solutions. We're nervous about the solutions.
Yeah. And so then the solutions that would get you out of it are just seeming beyond your reach. And
Mhm,
that's where it's really important that you don't step off on anything. It can be really easy to say, do you know what? Let's just put our hands around what we've got and let's just settle around. But unfortunately, that then leaks because they will have the people out there who go the other way and decide to push through a difficult situation. And it needs effort, it needs investment, it needs somebody to keep that drive going and to keep that motivation. But that's the way you get through it.
mhm,
We can't just hide behind walls and think where we are and, you know, let's just be happy and wait for it to change. You've got to make it change. And from a company point of view, for me, the way that we make that change is by going and showing that we're not stuck.
mhm,
Because typically everybody through the company feels how that senior leadership operates. So we need to make sure that we're not being crippled by uncertainty, that we're not reacting to the market and becoming all safe and secure. Because if they see us still out there, still as passionate about what we're going to achieve and what we want them to do in their job, they're less likely to feel as an inability to act. We do also, as employers, and it's polarizing at the moment again with so many people. I don't think I've ever, as an adult, lived through this level of strikes.
mhm.
That means something because as employers, there is still an expectation. So we've got to make sure that the people that were there feel that they're being valued in the job that they're doing and that they get the right direction, that they continue, that within our company, we're still driving. We're still doing things right. And if every individual company went out with that approach, I don't think we'd have any of the economic turmoil that we're seeing. Unfortunately, people get a very protectionist view, and again, that then causes you to stop that growth. And the only way we get out of anything like this is in a growth market.
That's really interesting. I mean, humans are humans, aren't they? And
Hmm.
we never. It's the long question being asked in sort of economics: are we rational actors? I think we are not rational actors. Either on an individual level or a massive level. We do all sorts of crazy things. But I'm curious. You mentioned there about sort of providing the direction to make sure that the people that work for you, work for Payprop, can see that you're being sort of definitive in how you're going forward. They're likely, of course, to be coming under pressures because they will know other people in the markets, etc.,
Hmm.
etc. And so that must feel like a sort of constant battle to kind of bring these people along. How do you navigate that?
Look, I've always felt the same within business. Motivation is like you having a wash.
Hmm.
Yeah, it needs to be done daily.
Right.
Yeah, and you cannot just believe that you can do this one motivational message and everybody will go off and charge into the breach and forevermore until it goes. You've got to keep going. You've got to keep showing them. You've got to keep listening as well. Just and I say this. You say that we're not rational beings. I go the other way.
Okay.
We are rational. It might not seem rational from your point of view because you don't always have the information as to why they've made the decision. But I
Hmm.
think human beings, we are very logical. Unfortunately, everybody's got their own data source. And
Hmm.
so there's hundreds, thousands of points of data, and we see our points of data. And to those points of data, it doesn't look like a rational response.
Hmm.
But that typically means there are things we don't know. So the biggest thing that you can do, if you're going to lead from that direction, is also to listen.
Hmm.
Because if you've got those data points, you can make those decisions so that, number one, your employees don't see you as the irrational person that is just blinkered and he's going out, because that's the other point. You can drive the company on. You don't want to do it because they believe that you're just out of touch
Yes.
and you don't understand what's happening in the market. They need to feel that we're listening, that we've addressed, but we're still motivated because we can see a way that this can work.
I think that's really interesting. Can you sort of you mentioned the sort of daily motivation? How does this sort of work? Because I suppose the not that I'm that sounds like exactly what you should do, but I suppose it's very easy for motivation to feel sort of forced or fake if it's not kind of there genuine. I suppose that's a risk with such sort of regular messaging. How do you get everyone? How do you provide that message
So
in a way
it's
that's really
lots and
authentic?
lots of little touch points that as a company we've really good. I mean, it's our direction. I've got a senior board above me who are all about the family feel and it feeling good. So everything down to when you start the company, from our common sense handbook as to what we expect from people. It's a very collaborative approach. But there are every morning when I come on through our internal channels, we'll be celebrating somebody's birthday. So you get a nice congratulations or to congratulate somebody. It's a good way to start the day.
Hmm.
We have these donuts where different people within the company will be put together to have a small half an hour meeting once a week. And actually, it's just to have a conversation with people who you might never in your normal day to day encounter within the business. So you can see what's happening with the different departments, what's within their life. So we all feel connected. It can be with departments. Certainly, since we've gone onto screens and we're a distributed company, so there is no need for you to be based at the office. And we were distributed and decided our distribution pre COVID. But what that does mean is there is more of this screen time.
Hmm.
And I've tried to navigate because the screens, they do get rid of some of that emotional content that you can't read as easily across a screen as you can when you're in a room with somebody. But we try and have those morning interactions. And again, they're not for the business. They're not there just to meet and say, okay, like scrum meetings with technicians, what are you going to achieve today? That's not motivational, that's functional.
Hmm.
What we want are those to reenact those water cooler moments that when you go to the office, you have an interaction and you feel that you are part of a social community. And so that's what we're trying to do. You can't orchestrate it. We still have our monthly meetings where we get people together. We still have our meetings in person, but this is about small daily interactions, community channels, some community channels where managers are not a part of,
Hmm.
where they feel that they can communicate within their teams and groups and only the right people are part of it. And because of that, you end up with that interaction. You end up with even though we've got them all over the country, all over the world, we have a feeling of togetherness. And I think that is part of a motivation that is often missed. I don't
That's
just
really
motivate the individual.
Yes, absolutely. No, that's really interesting. Changing it into a sort of culture of, I suppose there's a sort of tipping point where if you've got enough kind of motivated people within a culture, they'll bring all the other people along with them
Yeah.
because motivation breeds motivation.
And that's what we're trying to do, because nobody just wants to hear it from one voice. He's good and often passionate and a business leader and our original founder. People will still hang on his words. He is very passionate and he is very uh, able to talk about this business and its direction in a way that nobody else can. But it can't all sit with one individual. You're absolutely right. We need lots of voices out there. And that's what we've got now. We've got all these advocates within the business that, without realizing it, on all these micro interactions, by actually celebrating the company, are actually helping them with their own internal motivation and the way they view their job and their company.
I think one that I want to drop back to there because I thought it was really powerful was this idea of bringing people together from lots of different parts of the company on a sort of regular basis. So I assume from what you're saying, this is pretty much everyone in the company every week
Well,
does this in some way.
you can sign in and sign out.
Okay,
Again, you can't have something that is too prescribed, otherwise I'm turning up to form a function.
true.
So if I feel like I'm all, and it's called a donut, if I feel like I'm all donuted out, then I remove myself for a few weeks. And I
Okay.
then just won't be on the circulation. But it is great to go and speak to different people. Even the point of our wins.
Mhm.
Our wins always used to be shouted within just the sales team. Our wins are now celebrated company wide, because the person who sits there coding loves to hear what we've done or what our companies are saying about us, and sometimes feel detached from that recognition, that applause for the company. So we've now made that a group thing. But again, on all of these, it's the employee's decision. Now you can see where that employee is engaged. So if they're not engaged, then it's something for their direct report to be aware of. And perhaps we'll spend a bit more time making sure that person's all right. But if they are engaged and we can see they're engaged in doing things, I probably don't need to be as close to that individual because they've got some self motivation and some group motivation taking place.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and this has a sort of knock on effect around kind of silos in companies. A lot of companies and a lot of business owners find themselves very frustrated with the kind of level of siloing within their company. I've worked in a company prior where no team talked to any other team, and every team, like I used to kind of walk between them and listen to all of them. It's very interesting. Oh, why don't that team just do this? It would make our lives so much easier.
Yeah.
When was the last time you asked them? When was the last time you talked to them? You know,
Yeah.
and so this by sort of taking away the formal aspect of that and just saying, do you want to meet up for a donut or a chat? I'm really hoping that you provide them all like mail order donuts here when they
No, so it doesn't. It comes through. That's the thing. It's not what we would do, and I think shipping that around the world, we'd end up with all kinds of problems. So it's just
yeah
the name, unfortunately. I
okay.
love the idea that we have these donut meetings and everybody eats a donut. That's not it, unfortunately. Great.
It
That's a
probably
step
wouldn't be
too
good for
far
our
out
sort of
here.
health. Okay, well, we can dream, we can dream.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's really interesting that it has this sort of silo. I assume that you're gonna tell me that from your perspective, at least silos don't really seem like a major issue within Payprop, and that allows you to get ahead.
Yeah, I don't see silos as a major issue. I think they are, just like motivation, something that you need to work on.
Hmm.
It is really easy for me to talk to people of a like mind. So
Hmm.
for the tech people, it's really easy for them to talk to tech.
Hmm.
And although we have this where we get going around, it's not the same as having business conversations. So I know we do company wide meetings and we break into small focus groups to try and get talk business, because we might get to know each other as individuals. We might even have hobby groups where you might have people who are all into music and they've created their own little clique within it and talk about music. It's all about making these lots of different ones so you connect with different people on different levels. That's great for the motivational aspect. From a business point of view, that doesn't mean business collaboration. I think that's a separate thing to be dealt with. And we do that, but we do that through actual company meetings focus group breakouts and mix them, because I think they're two different things. Just because I can get along and speak to you as an individual, and we can speak about social activities and connect as human beings, still doesn't mean that I understand your job role or that you understand mine and its impact to the business. So they're two separate things, and we work on both, but they both need different approaches.
That's interesting. I mean, when I obviously talk to a lot of companies about sort of engagement. It's sort of what we do, and it's something that you've talked. I've seen your talks before on this, and it's very interesting. The thing that I find interesting is people seem to want the kind of silver bullet that gets you the, oh yeah, well if you just do that, then everything will be fine. Just introduce unlimited holiday and everything will be fine. I mean, if you introduce unlimited holiday into the wrong culture, the company's going to explode. It's
Yeah.
like you've got to do all of these little bits, don't you? You have to take find the areas that need improving and then start working on them. And I think your idea of motivation being like a shower, that it has to happen every day. I think that's really really interesting, because I think this gets lost in the day to day of life and work, right? Like a client calls you up and they're unhappy, and all of a sudden you're not thinking about team anymore, because you're like, oh my god, I need to go and fix that.
Yeah. And there's a
Then
level of it. I mean, if you think into others where it's as an extreme, so if you're in counselling, that person has physically a legal requirement to go and have their own counselling. It's called supervision, to make sure that they're not taking on too much of what they experience. Now, it's not going to be as acute in the job that somebody may do, but they still take that on. The problems that happen, the code that breaks for the developer, the customer service person who deals with the customer who is having issues, the salesperson who keeps getting said no, they are all forms that they take on above themselves. And unless we keep addressing it and motivate them, then that will tip the other way. And then we're liable to have unhappy employees who ultimately will go and find something else, because nobody wants to go and spend 8 hours a day doing something that makes you feel unhappy.
That's it. I mean, this is an important kind of mantra, really. I think to sort of sum up the modern world of work, really, isn't it? That the idea, we had Stuart on here a number of weeks ago, talking about the change in sort of culture and the way we'd moved from the one employer mentality through to the idea you just switch your job when you're unhappy. Now it's and this is something that we still find friction on. I think it's been really interesting. What I'm keen to do now is really start, like, let's get beyond this. Let's move to the second question, which is always, I think, a bit more uplifting. Is let's imagine we fix this. We've managed to find a way to give certainty. We have a culture that's cohesive around what that certainty is. What should we look forward to? What does 5 years' time look like in that scenario?
Well, look, if we do that, then I think a lot of the things that are our problems today go away, and we focus on then the bigger ones. Look, if that happens, I don't think that suddenly solves our housing crisis. If that happens, I think we will still have issues. I don't think it fixes necessarily government sleaze or whatever we get coming through. But down to some of the things like, we need growth. If you look at the sheer mass of the economics, our costs of running the country are increasing quicker than we're actually bringing in revenue. From a business point of view, if your business costs are growing quicker than your income, at some point you're insolvent. That doesn't work. We're no different as an economy, as a country. We run on those same principles, the joys of capitalism. But if we get this right, and if we get rid of that uncertainty, if we get a happy workforce and we get everybody striving towards growth, and we turn that the other way around, and the growth within this country actually exceeds what we need to do with our structure costs, then actually everybody's in a far different place. And that will filter down. That won't just be happy at job. That'll get rid of the pressures at home. That'll mean businesses will go out and find new things to do. You'll get investment. You'll get more R&D. You get more people wanting to take risks. And that wanting to take risks, that's where we get our advancements. That's where our technology comes from. A lot of people say it, we get a lot of our technology and our advancements in war, only because when there is something that definitive, we are willing to take risks. We are willing to make the decision that we can see something change. That happens in micro ways down through all of industry. we're willing to make those risks. We're willing to make those choices when we feel comfortable. And within psychology, it's something called like green line thinking. And when we're on that green line and we're happy, we are willing to look at new ideas. We are willing to take bigger risks. So we get there by doing this, by bringing everybody up. And then as a country, that's what we want. We don't want individual success. We want everybody as a success. And that's where we get if we do this. But it's difficult. When you deal with people, you deal with mob mentality. And mob mentality doesn't cause everybody to rise up. Unfortunately, it goes down to the lowest common denominator. So that's where we need to work at. We need to make sure that the lowest common denominator within our industry, within our economy, within your company is always still going to be success.
I think that's gosh, fascinating and very, very powerful. I think there's a. It reminded me of someone said something to me in sort of business the early days. You know, this is startup territory. You know it yourself from growing the company as you do. A lot of the problems that you face right now disappear when you get bigger. You can fix most of your problems with growth because some don't, some compound and get worse. But a lot of the things you think are really important right now, money fixes, and then you move on to the next problem, which seems much bigger then. And I suppose this is a somewhat of a roadmap to the growth in the economy, as you say. A lot of the issues that we face right now become, they become less important
I think
because
the
we get
focus
past them.
I think the focus too much has gone that way. I agree that as you grow, the problems become different. Wouldn't necessarily become easier or any less, but they
No.
progress, they become different. But you can't focus on that growth and the money as being the fixer to the problem. The reason I focused and came back to the employees and the company is because if you get that right, then the money comes. And if you get that right and the money comes, then you grow. Then your problems naturally go through. So actually, you start with the core, and everything else is then easily, and it's just part of running a business. There will always be challenges. They're like problems. There are challenges in running any business, and they grow and they change. But if you get that core right, then you can cope with anything. But if you're always chasing that money or you're chasing that next development, then you're always going to be looking back as to see whether the team that you've got and the company is coming with you. Get the right team, get the right ethos, get the right culture, get everybody on that same journey, and suddenly everything is going to be so much easier. And everything else that you wanted, that you thought your focus should be on that money, that profit, that bottom line, that all comes. You've got to
And
respect it on that journey, but it's the company and the culture and everything that you set up that decides whether you get there.
Yeah, I mean that's really powerful. I mean you can see this idea of the classic one is rowing in the same direction, right? If you imagine let's picture a boat with lots of people rowing in, and if they're all like don't know what they're doing, going in different places, your boat's not going anywhere. And so you're right in this instance, rather than focusing on like how are we going to get to America, it's like okay, how do we make sure that everyone on this boat is rowing in the same way and as hard as possible. I think it's certainly come through with everything that you've said today that that's your your real focus. And I think if regardless of whether numbers come first or second, the numbers speak for themselves here. What you've done has worked brilliantly. I'm interested just to kind of get one final thing from you. I've asked this one before, and it's a bit of a nasty question, so apologies. I didn't really want to do that. But if you could go out and go to, like, if picture the most of the companies that you've seen, if you could go to them and say, just fix that thing, one thing, just go fix that. What would you be looking at? What would you be suggesting there?
So that's a really difficult one because I don't think there is any, and I take you back to the earlier, there is no one silver bullet
Of
that I could
course.
go to a company and fix. But for most of them, particularly when you're dealing with large companies, listen. That's the biggest thing that they miss. The people on the ground that are doing the job have the best view and need to have a voice within the company. A lot of them feel that they are disenfranchised, that they are not listened to, that they are there to perform a function, and the direction only comes top down. I think that is a biggest failure when a company gets big. When you're small, you understand that every voice matters. When you get bigger, that shouldn't change. every voice has value in the job that they are doing, and they have insights that you need that information. We talked about seeming irrational because you've not got the right data points. So if you don't go out and get that data that you've got, that you're paying for people to go and do that job, to go and experience that market, then you're just failing in using all of the resources that are open to you. So if I had to go to a big company and say, look, this is it, it would always be drag them down. Make sure you're listening to the right people, because they'll help you with that right decision and make sure that culture is coming. The amount of times I hear that people say the culture changed, and the culture changed often because they didn't listen to the people down there doing the job, that somebody up here who'd lost their vision suddenly decided that I'm going to change everything.
That is an amazing place to finish, I think, Neil. That's really, really powerful. And I think fantastic advice, probably for anyone, but as you say, particularly sort of large companies can lose this. Neil, it has been such a pleasure to have you with us today. I'm so grateful that you could join
No, it's
us.
been
Thank you.
lovely. It's been lovely, Fraser. Always. I really respect what you're doing. Employee engagement is important. So no, always happy to support in anything, and
Thank you.
wish you all the
Really
best.
appreciate that. Thanks, Neil.
No
Brilliant.
problem, Fraser. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.